the silence that shakes us. Have you ever reached out in prayer, your heart cracked wide open only to be met with silence? No comforting whisper, no inner peace, just nothing. For many people walking a spiritual path, this moment is terrifying. It can feel like a betrayal, like you've been abandoned by the divine, like the sacred lifeline you've always turned to has suddenly snapped. But what if I told you this silence, this eerie, aching, devastating silence, is not a sign of spiritual failure, but a gateway into something deeper? Let's rewind. Remember when prayer used to work, when you could fold your hands, close your eyes, and almost immediately feel a sense of relief wash over you? When your heart felt heard, when answers seemed to come through signs, coincidences, or inner clarity. It was a relationship, a dialogue. You spoke, Spirit responded. This is often how the spiritual journey begins. Prayer works until it doesn't. Then one day, it changes. You pray for guidance and receive none. You ask for peace and feel more confused. You beg for comfort and are met with emptiness. What's worse is that this silence often comes right when you need Spirit most. During a crisis, during grief, during heartbreak, and you start to ask yourself, am I being punished? Have I done something wrong? Has God left me? But maybe God hasn't left you at all. Maybe something else is happening. Here's what's rarely acknowledged in spiritual communities. Almost everyone goes through this. Many spiritual seekers, monks, nuns, mystics, saints, have all spoken of a time when prayer stopped working, when the divine grew silent, when the light withdrew. Saint John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. Mother Teresa lived in this darkness for decades. Even Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So if you're in this place, you're not broken. You're in good company. What's really happening here? You're outgrowing transactional spirituality. Transactional faith says, if I do this, then God will do that. If I pray, then I will be heard. If I believe, I will be rewarded. But prayer is not a vending machine, and God is not a cosmic customer service agent. In the early stages of spirituality, this transactional view helps us build trust. It teaches us that the universe is responsive, that there is something bigger than us that cares. But eventually, we are invited to let go of that dynamic, to step into a relationship that's less about answers and more about presence. So why does prayer stop working? Because something deeper is trying to emerge. The silence invites you into raw trust, into intimacy without guarantees, into loving the divine for no other reason than love itself. It's a radical shift from praying to get something to praying to be with something. This is when prayer becomes less about words and more about being, less about asking and more about surrendering, less about fixing and more about allowing. And in that silence, something holy begins to grow. You may not see it now. You may feel lost in a void. But just like seeds buried in the soil, your soul is being reshaped. In the dark, your ego dies. In the silence, your expectations dissolve. And in their place, a quieter, wiser, more rooted faith begins to bloom. Not the faith that demands signs, but the faith that whispers, I trust you, even when I can't hear you. It's tempting to escape the silence, to distract yourself, to go back to old beliefs, to seek out spiritual highs elsewhere. But if you can stay in the stillness, if you can let the silence do its work, you'll come to see. This isn't abandonment, it's transformation. The shift from devotion to deconstruction. When prayer stops working, it's not just silence you're facing. You're confronting a deeper unraveling one that shakes the very core of your beliefs. The spiritual structures you once stood on begin to crumble. What once felt solid now feels hollow. You might find yourself questioning everything. Was I ever really connected? What if none of it was real? Have I just been talking to myself this whole time? This moment is not the end of your spirituality. It's the beginning of deconstruction. Deconstruction is the process of taking apart what you've been taught about God, prayer, yourself, and the nature of reality. It's terrifying because it feels like losing your foundation. But here's the truth. You're not destroying your faith. You're clearing away the false layers. Deconstruction happens when the soul refuses to settle for inherited answers. It longs for authentic experience, not dogma. It wants truth, not just tradition, and that longing is sacred. One of the most disorienting parts of this process is losing your image of God. The God you once prayed to, the one who listened, comforted, protected, may no longer feel real. You might feel like you're losing a friend, a parent, even a lifeline. This grief is real, and it deserves to be honored. But sometimes, the version of God we lose was never the full picture to begin with. Sometimes, we outgrow the image we once needed, so we can encounter the mystery in a new and deeper way. Before, you had answers. Now, you have questions. Before, you had clarity. Now, you have mystery. But what if mystery isn't a step backward, but a step toward maturity? Faith doesn't mean never doubting. It means choosing to stand inside the questions without needing to resolve them immediately. You're moving from a spirituality of control to a spirituality of surrender. And in that surrender, something beautiful is forming. Many of us were taught either explicitly or subtly that if your faith is strong enough, you'll always feel connected. That if you're praying right, you'll always feel peace. That spiritual life is a steady climb upward toward bliss and light. But that's not how deep growth works. Real transformation often looks like descent into doubt, into silence, into darkness. This descent isn't failure. It's sacred evolution. You may not be receiving messages, feelings, or signs, but what if the silence is the message? What if it's teaching you to stop grasping for answers and start resting in presence? What if it's saying, let go of trying to control me. Stop using me as a spiritual vending machine. Just be here with me. Without needing a reason. It's uncomfortable, but it's holy. This is one of the hardest things for modern people. We want to fix everything. When prayer stops working, we want to figure it out. Adjust the method. Try harder. Change techniques. But sometimes the invitation isn't to fix. It's to sit. To let go of the striving. To let the silence be what it is. To stop forcing clarity. This is where real intimacy begins, where you allow yourself to be seen by the divine, even when you feel lost. Up until now, you may have believed God was a feeling. When you felt warm, you thought God was there. When you felt peace, you thought God was near. But feelings are fleeting, and God is more than your emotions. Sometimes the absence of feeling is what reveals the presence of something deeper. That something is stillness. That something is presence. That something is love. Without performance, the silence isn't punishment. It's the wilderness. In the wilderness, there are no maps, no familiar prayers, no clear direction, but there is space. And in that space, you begin to notice the subtle movements of the soul. You begin to hear a voice that isn't loud, but is deeply true. This is where the real spiritual journey begins, not in the sanctuary, but in the desert. Rebuilding a new kind of relationship with the divine. So much of modern spirituality, whether religious or not, rests on a transactional model. If I pray hard enough, I'll be blessed. If I meditate daily, I'll stay peaceful. If I follow the rules, good things will happen. But when prayer stops working, this model falls apart. And that's not a failure. That's an invitation to move from a transactional relationship with the divine to a transformational one. In transformation, it's no longer about what you get. It's about who you're becoming. At some point, we all come to this crossroads. We can keep seeking, striving for answers, experiences, emotional highs, or we can surrender, not giving up, but letting go of needing to feel something every time you pray. letting go of demanding signs from God, letting go of using spirituality to avoid discomfort. In surrender, you begin to realize the divine has never been far. You just stopped recognizing it in silence. Maybe you won't feel moved in prayer the way you used to. Maybe scripture doesn't speak to you right now. Maybe church, temple, or sacred spaces feel hollow. That's okay. It may be time to discover new languages of the sacred. Walking in nature, sitting in stillness, journaling your anger, listening to instrumental music, lighting a candle and saying nothing. Sometimes, the way back isn't backward, it's forward into mystery. We often think doubt is the enemy of faith, but doubt, when approached with humility, can become one of its greatest teachers. Doubt removes the scaffolding of false certainty. It teaches us to stand on something deeper, not belief in doctrines, but trust in presence. When you doubt what you once believed, you're not betraying God. You're searching for the real God beyond secondhand beliefs. That's not rebellion. That's devotion in its purest form. In mystical traditions, silence isn't a void. It's the language of God. But we live in a noisy world, and we often mistake silence for absence. What if, instead, the silence you're experiencing is actually a space being made, a womb, in which something new is forming? The soul doesn't evolve through certainty. It evolves through surrender, through learning to sit in silence long enough for something deeper than answers to rise. This part is painful. The old self, the one who had the answers, the formulas, the spiritual habits that worked, is dying. But this death is not the end. Like all spiritual deaths, it is a threshold. You are crossing over from who you were to who you are becoming. This death of the ego, of the rigid identity, is the only way to be reborn into authenticity. As the mystics say, you must die before you die, and then you will know what it means to truly live. Out of the silence comes a softer faith, less rigid, less performative, less dependent on external approval. It's not a faith built on certainty, but on intimacy. Not one that knows all the answers, but one that listens more deeply. This new faith is wild. It doesn't live in the boxes of religion. It flows in the in-between. It dances with mystery. And it's yours, not inherited, but discovered through fire. Eventually, prayer may return, but not the way you knew it. It might not be words. It might not be requests. It might simply be a breath, a gaze, a tear, a moment of quiet. Prayer becomes less of an action and more of a posture. Less about getting something and more about being with something holy. Even when you don't feel it, even when you don't understand it, you show up anyway. That, too, is sacred. You'll begin to notice subtle shifts. You speak more gently. You listen more closely. You hold others with more compassion. You stop needing to fix everything. And that's because you've met yourself in the silence. You've met God not as an idea, but as a presence you can't explain. The silence didn't kill your faith. It resurrected it. Embracing the journey and trusting the process. Let's say it plainly, you are not broken. You are not unfaithful because prayer doesn't move you anymore. You are not lost because you can't feel God right now. You are not defective because the old ways no longer nourish you. You are simply in transition, in transformation. And like all deep transformations, it's messy. But messiness is not the opposite of spiritual growth. It's often the proof of it. Many traditions speak of the desert, the void, or the dark night. These aren't mistakes. They are initiations. You are being led not away from the divine, but into a deeper, more intimate understanding of it. The silence isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's the space between chapters, the womb before rebirth, the threshold before the next becoming. One of the cruelest lies we believe in the dark night is this: I'm the only one going through this. But you're not. Across centuries and cultures, saints, sages, mystics, monks, seekers, and skeptics have walked this path. Many of them wrote in pain. Many cried out into the same silence. Many wondered, like you, has God left me? But all of them eventually found something deeper on the other side. Their stories echo yours. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. If you're here still breathing, still searching, still showing up, you're already courageous. This journey asks you to walk forward without the assurance of signs, to keep loving without the warmth of return, to stay open when your heart wants to shut down. But what if that's the most courageous act of all? To pray when you don't feel it, to trust when you can't see it, to rest in the mystery rather than control the outcome. What if prayer isn't just asking or praising? What if it's also washing the dishes with mindfulness, crying out on the floor with no words, looking at the stars and feeling small, saying thank you without knowing to whom, whispering help without expecting an answer? Prayer doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't even have to be spoken. Sometimes your very life becomes the prayer. It's okay not to have answers. It's okay not to have certainty. It's okay to sit in the question, why isn't this working anymore? And respond not with more effort, but with more presence. You don't need to force a spiritual breakthrough. You just need to be here honestly. Let the silence do its quiet work. Let the mystery reshape you. Let the unknowing be holy ground. Spiritual maturity isn't found in how fluent you are in sacred texts, or how many hours you pray, or how certain you are in your theology. It's found in your willingness to stay in the mystery, your ability to love even in silence, your courage to keep showing up without needing reward, your freedom from needing God to perform for your faith to survive. This is a quieter, deeper kind of strength. Not loud, not flashy, but unwavering. Eventually, you will begin to notice beauty again. Not dramatic, fireworks kind of beauty, but the kind found in a quiet breeze on your face, a stranger's unexpected kindness, a sunrise that makes you pause, a moment of laughter after weeks of sorrow. These small moments become sacraments, not because they are loud, but because you now see them. The silence has taught you to see through new eyes. You no longer pray out of desperation. You pray out of communion. You no longer need to bargain. You simply show up. And in that showing up, you discover the divine in places you never expected, in emptiness, in stillness, in your own heartbeat, in the breath that keeps rising and falling. God was never gone. You were simply being invited into a deeper kind of union. It may not feel like it, but beneath the surface, you've been growing roots. While you doubted, you became real. While you wept, you became soft. While you questioned, you became wise. This journey has not been wasted. You are not who you once were, and that's not a tragedy. It's a testament to your transformation. When prayer stops working, it might feel like something is broken, but perhaps something sacred is being born not in your words, but in your silence, not in your certainty, but in your surrender. Let that be enough. Let it be holy. Let it be okay.